The New York Giants are 2-9 after a 30-7 loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Week 12, and the loss to Tampa marked their 6th straight loss and 20th loss since the start of the 2023 season. This franchise has been through it over the past couple of years, and we are seemingly a million miles away from the team that went 9-7-1 during the 2022 regular season and the team that won a playoff game that year. A lot has changed in the last 2 years, and since their 38-7 playoff loss to the Eagles, this team is just 8-20 with countless bad moments, including a 40-0 loss to the Cowboys in Week 1 of the 2023 season, a 24-3 loss to the Seahawks in which head coach Brian Daboll erupted on the sidelines in what was the Devin Witherspoon breakout game, their former number 7 overall pick asking if fans flip burgers, and most recently, releasing former quarterback Daniel Jones less than 2 years after giving him a $160 million contract. Oh, and their former running back Saquon Barkley is having an MVP caliber season for the division rival Philadelphia Eagles. This franchise at this point in time is a complete disaster, and in today's video, we're going to break down how they got here, what's next, and what their realistic plan should be moving forward. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by breaking down how the Giants got to where we are today, and it starts back in the 2022 draft, which was general manager Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll's first draft together. They had 2 first-round picks due to the Bears trading up for Justin Fields in 2021, and ended up with 2 top 7 draft picks. And having 2 top 7 draft picks is great, and any franchise would love to have that opportunity, but you of course have to hit on the draft picks when they're made. The one thing I want to emphasize when we go over the Giants draft history is I'm not going to have revisionist history and claim they should have taken X player when that certainly wasn't the case at the time. Meaning I'm not saying, wow, they should have taken Brock Purdy in the first round despite him eventually being Mr. Irrelevant. Now, there is one pick I always had a problem with even when it was made, and we'll get to that in a minute, but I liked the Kayvon Thibodeaux and Evan Neal selections at the time. Truly. And to be honest, I didn't think it was unreasonable for the Jags to draft Evan Neal number 1 overall back in 2022 because of the tumultuous rookie season Trevor Lawrence had. But the KT and Evan Neal picks were selections I liked because I thought they were doing a good job of setting the tone and addressing the trenches from day one, and that each of these players could be Giants for a long time, and that Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal would be a great tackle duo, whether it be for Daniel Jones or whoever would eventually become the Giants' next quarterback. Where I had the big problem was selecting Wan'Dale Robinson at number 43 overall, and mainly over former Georgia wide receiver George Pickens. Pickens currently has over 750 receiving yards in 11 games for the Steelers in 2024, and barring an injury, will have his second 1,000-yard season in 3 years, and the Giants' leading receivers in 2022 were Darius Slayton, who is fine by the way, Richie James, Isaiah Hodgins, Saquon Barkley, and Daniel Bellinger. They absolutely could have used George Pickens, and several teams could have for that matter too, and I also thought they reached on Wan'Dale at the time. They also selected offensive lineman Josh Ezeudu and corner Cordell Flott in the 3rd round, and with 5 top 100 draft picks in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Giants maybe hit on one of them in Kayvon Thibodeaux, who is very hot and cold as a player, and despite having 11.5 sacks in 2023, he only had 3 more pressures in his second season on over 100 more pass rushing snaps than he did in his rookie season, meaning he was not getting home consistently, and the double-digit sack season is very misleading. Not only that, but when you think of elite pass rushers, Kayvon Thibodeaux's name does not come up often. He's not a bad player, but he's not an elite franchise-changing player by any stretch of the imagination either. I don't want to spend too much time on Evan Neal other than saying this pick didn't work out, and that there's a reason about a third of first-round picks are above-average players, or stars, and about a third are average starters, and about a third are busts, and unfortunately Evan Neal is a draft bust. Again, I would argue the process was right with what the Giants were trying to do in the 2022 draft, at least with their first-round picks. Right process, but unfortunately bad results with one of their picks. It happens. Every team drafts busts at some point, but the 2023 draft is where it really gets bad for this team, and this is where I would argue things really turn sour for Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll, and everyone else involved with the current state of the New York Giants. Entering the 2023 draft, the outlook for this franchise was optimistic. Yes, I know they got beat by 31 points in the divisional round of the 2022 playoffs, but anytime you win a playoff game, I don't really care if it's against the Vikings, who were considered frauds by everybody during the 2022 season. Anytime you win a playoff game, especially in the first year of a regime with a new head coach and new GM, it is a big deal. And if the Giants nailed the 2023 draft, there was a chance they could have been a consistent 9, 10, or 11 win team and been a force year in and year out. Now, as we know, that obviously didn't happen, and this draft class a little over a year and a half later looks not just bad, not even slightly below average, but horrendously bad. Their first round pick was corner Deonte Banks, and I didn't hate the pick at the time. That's one thing that I do want to emphasize in this video, is that we are not going into this with revisionist history and saying, well, they should have taken that player because obviously everybody knew he was going to be better. No. What was unfortunate for the Giants was they needed a receiver entering the 2023 draft, and right before they were on the clock, 4 receivers went in consecutive order, with Jackson Smith-Njigba going to the Seahawks, Quentin Johnson going to the Chargers, Zay Flowers going to the Ravens, and Jordan Addison going to the Vikings. Jackson Smith-Njigba and Zay Flowers are both top 10 in the NFL in receiving yards, and I really think Zay Flowers is on his way to being a perennial 1,000-yard receiver. Now, unfortunately for Zay, his numbers will probably always be limited, especially with Lamar Jackson as his quarterback, given that they run the ball a lot, and especially with Derrick Henry. But the point is the Giants were the last team standing, and none of those teams were going to trade out of taking a receiver, knowing the Giants were going to take a receiver if they wanted to trade up. That is unfortunate luck. And also, this kind of happened to the Giants in the 2024 draft when they wanted to go up and get either Jaden Daniels or Drake May. If a team simply does not want to trade out of a pick, they're not. And then a game of musical chairs, they couldn't sit down. So I don't want to say they were forced to take Deonte Banks, because again, I thought he was a good prospect coming out of Maryland, but Deonte has been a nightmare for the Giants since being drafted. There's a lot of concerns with Deonte, whether it's his ability not being up to the level that they want it to be, whether it's his effort, and there's a couple of plays in particular. There was the touchdown against CeeDee Lamb on Thursday Night Football earlier this year on primetime for everybody to see, where Deonte Banks effectively just stopped trying on the play when CeeDee was at the 24-yard line, or on a play against the Eagles later in the year. And that is a huge red flag, because that shows a lack of commitment to the team, to the front office, to the organization, to the fans, to everybody, and there's no way around that. And also, Deonte Banks has a passer rating of 137 when targeted this year, and a perfect passer rating is 158.3, so it's not like it's excused because he's a shutdown corner. He's been anything but that. Their second round pick was center John Michael Schmitz, who has been a disaster as well, and John Michael Schmitz is a bottom 5 center in the NFL, and I'll be honest, this was another pick I thought was fine at the time. And the one thing that I do want to hammer home with the Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll era is when you look at their first and second round picks within the first 2 years of their regime, whether it was Evan Neal, whether it was Kayvon Thibodeau, Wan'Dale Robinson, no, that one I did have a problem with. Deonte Banks was fine, especially considering the circumstances, and I also like John Michael Schmitz. The process, I would argue, was correct. The results, unfortunately, just didn't follow. And whenever teams have a Lions-type success, where they draft the Penei Sewells and the Aiden Hutchinsons, and whenever they have as many successful draft picks as they have, there's a reason they get as hyped up as they do, because they are very clearly the outlier and not the standard. I don't want to say the Giants tried to go down the Lions route, but they really tried to emphasize the trenches and unfortunately struck out. John Michael Schmitz gets bullied week in and week out, and Vita Vea certainly had his way with him most recently in week 12, but this isn't just a one-game sample from John Michael Schmitz. To go back to not being able to select a receiver in the first round of the 2023 draft, the Giants eventually traded up on day 2, and they went up to pick 73 to go get receiver Jalin Hyatt from Tennessee. They traded their 3rd round pick and their 4th round pick, and unfortunately Jalin Hyatt didn't work out. Now, eventually Malik Neighbors did work out, and they have their wide receiver one of the future, but for your first 3 picks to be Deonte Banks, John Michael Schmitz, and Jalin Hyatt, and then to not pick again all the way until pick 172 of the 2023 NFL Draft, to strike out 3 times, that is not going to set your franchise up for success. And anytime you have a 5th, 6th, or 7th round pick, if you hit on any of those selections, great, but you absolutely cannot head into a draft and say, guys, we have to hit on multiple 5th, 6th, or 7th round picks because our rounds 1 through 3 struck out. And unfortunately, the Giants have struck out a lot over the past couple of years in the Joe Schoen era, but I will say that I thought the process in which they went about things was the correct way. The results unfortunately didn't follow. Now, for as bad as the 2022 and 2023 draft classes for the Giants were, the 2024 draft class is completely different. The 2024 Giants draft class is one of the best classes out of any of the teams we've seen so far. I think everyone would agree that Malik Nabers is definitely being held back by the quarterback play in New York, and if he has even close to league average quarterback play, which he obviously hasn't throughout his rookie year, he should be a 1,000-yard receiver year in and year out. But one of the biggest reasons this franchise is where they are, which is rock bottom at the moment, is the disconnect over simple things. During Nabers' post-game press conference after the Bucs game, he said, "I started getting the ball when it was 30-0 and to ask Daboll about it." And you can't help but feel frustrated for Nabers in this situation because this team, while bad, yes, they're not close to maximizing what they can do, and that's where a lot of my frustration stems from. There's going to be conversations about whether or not they should keep both Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, and the case to keep them would largely be based off of their 2024 draft class and use that as a stepping stone for the Giants' future and to go from there. But I'm at the point where I think they should let both of them go, because if they were to keep both of them, I think the situation would be very similar to the cycle of what the Chicago Bears have done over the last several years. Have a GM and head coach on their last legs, draft a rookie quarterback in the first round, and when you, not surprisingly, have a losing record with a rookie quarterback, because let's be honest here, the likelihood you have a losing record with a rookie quarterback is far greater than the chance of having a winning record with a rookie quarterback, you get fired. That inevitably wastes a year of everybody's time, and in a field where jobs do not last forever, and the average length of careers is around 3 seasons. And for as good as the 2024 draft class is for the Giants, due to selections like Nabers of course, Tyler Nubin, Drew Phillips, Theo Johnson, and Tyrone Tracy, I am a firm believer that the damage is done. Obviously, we know all about giving Daniel Jones the big contract after the 2022 season was a mistake, but I think that mistake will save other teams from doing the same exact thing. And the reason we bring that up is because Sam Darnold is currently in the midst of a great season, and there's almost certainly going to be a team that offers him a lot more money than they probably should. But I don't expect Sam to receive a 4-year contract with 2 full years in guarantees, due in large part to the Daniel Jones contract and everything that has transpired after the Daniel Jones contract. This team was 2-3 at a point after beating the Seahawks 29-20 in Week 5, and in the 6 games since then, they have scored just 74 points, which equates to just 12.3 per game. 22 of those 74 points came in a game against the Commanders, and this offense right now is downright terrible. I know Andrew Thomas being done for the year obviously complicates things, but the offense was bad before Andrew Thomas got hurt, and it was going to be bad even after Andrew Thomas got hurt. And when you look at the Giants' remaining schedule, I don't know how you can confidently say they are going to win any game out of their remaining 6. I would like to think they're not going to finish the year on a 12-game losing streak and hope they can pull out 1 or 2 games, but they should not be favored in any game for the remainder of the season. This is a bad football team, and it's the culmination of multiple draft picks gone wrong and multiple high draft picks along the offensive line missing as well. The path for the Giants to getting back to seriously competing is not an easy one either, because there's a lot of holes in this roster to fix, and it's not going to be complete in one offseason, and because of that, I think it's easier to let both Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen go, rather than them trying to mortgage the future of the New York Giants in a last gasp effort to save their jobs. So because of that, I think there will be a new head coach and general manager for the Giants this offseason. But what I also think needs to be emphasized with not just the Giants, but even a team like the Raiders for that matter too, is just because there is a head coach opening does not automatically mean Ben Johnson is going to be the team's head coach. Obviously, I think of Ben Johnson very highly, and I think he will be a great head coach for a long time at whatever team he chooses, if in fact that's the route he chooses to go. But if I were Ben Johnson, I wouldn't want anything to do with this situation for a multitude of reasons. The path for the Giants to being a successful franchise is going to be a long path. It's not going to be one offseason, and especially not in a draft class where the quarterbacks are not anywhere close to what they were in 2024, and unfortunately for the Giants, they couldn't get up to go get the quarterback they wanted because the Commanders and Patriots each wanted Jaden Daniels and Drake May, and you can't blame them based on what we've seen so far. The Philadelphia Eagles are also a very difficult team to play, and they beat the hell out of the Giants earlier this year, and I would imagine they're going to beat them again when they play a second time. They are a thorn in a lot of team sides, and they currently run the NFC East. Yes, I know Dallas won the division in 2023, history, and there hasn't been a repeat winner in nearly 20 years, but the Eagles are a good team year in and year out, and they are a very good team, and there's a real chance that they go to the NFC Championship game this year, if not the Super Bowl. So when you look at the Giants entering the 2025 offseason and ultimately the 2025 draft, I think it has to be acknowledged that it's not going to be a one-year turnaround. They're not going to go from 4-13 or 5-12 to 12-5 in 1 year, and the one big thing that I don't want the Giants to do entering the 2025 draft is select a quarterback because they feel that they have to. I think that was kind of what happened with Daniel Jones back in 2019, and everybody knew at the time when they selected him at number 6 overall that that was a huge reach, and obviously that proved to be correct. Now, Daniel did have a couple of okay years, and 2019 was fine as he threw for 24 touchdowns, and there looked to be promise at one point with Daniel Jones, and even 2022 was fine because for the most part, he played mistake-free football, but over the past 2 years, it has gone tremendously downhill, and that's the big thing with the Giants entering 2025 that I do not want them to do. I don't want them to select a Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders or Jalen Milroe simply because they feel they have to. Now, if they feel that that guy is the franchise quarterback, by all means go for it, but just selecting a quarterback to select a quarterback I think is a tremendous mistake, and I hope it's one that the Giants don't make. The one path that I think they could go down is to try and do what the Vikings did this offseason, which is to have a bridge quarterback, and I don't think the Giants would have the success the Vikings have had this year, due in large part to the coaching staff and the culture that the Vikings have built, because that's taken a couple of years for everybody to buy in, and you've seen the results that the Vikings have had this year, but that should be the type of rebuild that the Giants should strive for this offseason. They have about $60 million to work with in cap space this offseason, and this is per over the cap, and I really can't wait to see what the Giants do, because I think the best thing they could do this offseason is to acknowledge that this is not a one-year turnaround, and that they're not going to sweep the Eagles in 2025 with the current roster they have, and that they're not going to be a 12 or 13 win team next year, and acknowledge that next year will probably be a 5 or 6 win season, but next year can be the foundation for a better tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 41% of people watching are subscribed. It helps the channel tremendously. We're closing in on 175, and I cannot thank you guys enough for the support, and until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.